"You're my son, and you're a disgrace." The words cut through the marble-lined dining hall like a blade. For a moment, even the ticking of the antique clock seemed to freeze. Lucas Carter, a 42-year-old billionaire, known for dismantling rivals in boardrooms without flinching, now stood glaring at his own 7-year-old son, as though he were the enemy. Ethan Carter, small shoulders hunched under the weight of invisible stones, kept his eyes on the floor. He clutched his math worksheet so tightly the paper crumpled. The red marks screamed louder than any words. Another failed test. Lucas's voice thundered again. "I built empires before I was 30. And you, my own flesh and blood, can't add single digits without stumbling?" His fist slammed against the table, rattling silverware. Ethan didn't cry. He had learned long ago that tears only sharpened his father's anger. From the shadows of the hallway, a figure paused. Maya Williams, the new maid, froze mid-step with the vacuum handle still in her hand. She hadn't meant to overhear, but the accusation echoed through her bones. She had once heard those very words hurled at her when she was a child, struggling with numbers in a cramped Louisiana kitchen. Lucas grabbed his coat. "I'll fly to Seattle tonight, another business deal. If you fail the next exam, Ethan, you're finished. No more tutors, no more second chances." He stormed out, leaving silence thick as stone. Ethan sat still, knuckles white, fighting the urge to vanish. Maya's chest tightened. She saw more than a boy with poor grades. She saw a child suffocating under impossible expectations. And in that instant, she felt a reckless urge to step beyond the invisible line between servant and family. That night, when the mansion quieted, she found Ethan doodling circles in the margin of his notebook. "Hey," she whispered carefully, as if not to scare away a fragile bird. "I know I'm just the maid, but what if I told you math could be a game?" Ethan's eyes flickered with both doubt and curiosity, and that, unknown to Lucas, was the beginning of a secret alliance that would challenge everything money could control. If you find this story intriguing, subscribe and leave a comment. If not, go ahead and like it anyway. Because what happened next would not only rewrite a child's future, but shake the millionaire's world to its core. The echo of Lucas Carter's fury lingered long after the front door slammed. In the silence, Ethan sat alone at the table, his small fingers tracing the red X's across his worksheet. Outside, the driveway swallowed the growl of the billionaire's luxury car as it disappeared into the night. Maya Williams leaned against the cool marble wall in the hallway, her breath caught in her throat. She should have returned to her duties, polishing the silver, folding linens. But something in her heart anchored her in place. She recognized the look in Ethan's eyes. Not just defeat, but the quiet acceptance of someone who believed failure was his identity. She had worn that same look once, long ago. Later that evening, when the house settled into the soft hum of night, staff in their quarters, the kitchen quiet, Maya found Ethan again. He was seated in the sunroom, sketching aimlessly in the margins of his math notebook. "Hey," Maya whispered, careful not to startle him. "I know I'm just the maid, but what if we tried something different?" Ethan looked up warily. "Does it have math?" "A little," she smiled, "but also colors and candy." His eyebrow arched, suspicious but curious. She cleared the coffee table, poured out small piles of brightly wrapped candies, and began stacking them into towers. "This," she said, pointing, "is what addition looks like. See? Each candy is a brick." For the first time that day, Ethan's lips curled into the faintest smile. They spent hours that way, laughing when Maya accidentally miscounted, high-fiving when Ethan corrected her, building and rebuilding towers of sugar. Math was no longer an enemy on a page. It was something he could see, touch, and even taste. The next afternoon, with Lucas away in Seattle, Maya found Ethan waiting by the kitchen island, candies and cereal already set out. "Ready for another game?" he asked shyly. From then on, their lessons became ritual. They hid behind the greenhouse with paper clips, in the laundry room with bottle caps, in the breakfast nook with flashcards shaped like pizza slices. Days passed, and slowly, something extraordinary began to happen. Ethan started to understand. He passed one test, then another. By the third, his teacher called Lucas personally. "Whatever you're doing at home, it's working. Lucas, baffled, muttered, "Strange. Must be the pressure finally sinking in." He hung up, proud but puzzled. Meanwhile, Maya and Ethan kept their secret, and with each lesson, Ethan's shoulders lifted a little higher, his laughter grew brighter, and his once silent voice began to fill the halls. One rainy Thursday, everything changed. Lucas came home early. The staff wasn't expecting him. Maya certainly wasn't. She and Ethan sat cross-legged on the reading room floor, arranging flashcards into a pizza puzzle. Ethan was giggling, counting slices aloud. The door swung open. "What the hell is going on here?" Ethan froze. Maya's heart plummeted. Lucas's face twisted with disbelief. "You're the maid. Who told you to teach my son?" "I didn't," Maya stammered, rising quickly. You went behind my back?" His voice rose, sharp as broken glass. "Using my child to play school?" Maya's throat tightened. She wanted to explain, but her words tangled. And then something unexpected happened. Ethan stood, his small fists clenched. His voice shook but carried more strength than ever before. "She helped me." Lucas blinked. "You said I was a failure," Ethan continued, his voice trembling. "But she never did." For a moment, the millionaire, accustomed to boardrooms and billion-dollar deals, stood speechless before the simplest truth. Ethan lifted a flashcard proudly. "She taught me with candy, with drawings. She showed me it's okay to see things differently. I passed because of her." That sentence cracked the silence like thunder. "You said I was a failure? But she never did." Lucas's eyes darted from his son's determined face to the worksheet on the floor. 95 out of 100. His anger faltered, replaced by something unfamiliar. Doubt. Maya didn't flinch under his gaze. "I didn't plan this," she said softly. "I just saw a child who needed help. And I knew how to help, because I used to be him." The room hung heavy with tension. Lucas turned without another word and left. The next morning, the millionaire appeared in the kitchen. He placed a brand new whiteboard on the wall and handed Maya a marker. "If you're going to keep teaching my son," he muttered, "at least do it properly." Maya froze. Unsure if it was approval or a threat, she only nodded. From that day, their lessons moved into the sunlight of the breakfast nook. Ethan thrived, scribbling equations with color-coded markers, laughing at math songs, even inventing games of his own. But Maya felt the invisible line every time she picked up a marker. Lucas's warning echoed. "Don't overstep." It didn't take long before the rest of the staff noticed. The once chatty housekeeper, Mrs. Adela, grew quiet when Maya passed. Bernard, the groundskeeper, stopped sharing morning jokes. "She's getting too comfortable," Maya overheard one afternoon. "Carter pays her to sweep floors, not play teacher." "She's still just the help," another voice muttered. "What if she gets it wrong?" The words stung, but Maya kept teaching. At night, she found small notes folded on her stair rail in uneven handwriting. "Thank you for the board. Today was fun. I like green now." She tucked them into her apron pocket, silent promises that her work mattered, even if no one else believed it. Weeks later, Ethan bounded down the stairs, waving a math test with 98 circled in red. "I'm getting smart," he shouted, beaming at Maya. She hugged him tightly. "You've always been smart." "Now you see it too." Lucas entered moments later, phone in hand. He glanced at the paper, lips tightening before releasing the faintest smile. "I suppose that calls for a reward." For Ethan, it was a moment of triumph. For Maya, it was bittersweet. She was proud, yet painfully aware of the fragile line she walked every day. Because in Lucas Carter's house, progress came with conditions, and the storm was only beginning to gather. The Carter mansion buzzed with a strange new rhythm. For the first time in years, Ethan Carter's laughter echoed through the hallways. Every morning, he darted down the stairs clutching flashcards, eager for his next lesson with Maya. The once timid, silent boy was now full of questions. Why are even numbers called even? Can fractions be friends? He would tug on Maya's sleeve until she laughed and answered with puzzles or games. But not everyone celebrated. Maya noticed it first in Mrs. Adela, the senior housekeeper. The woman who once shared gentle smiles now offered nothing but clipped nods. Bernard, the groundskeeper, turned quiet too. Even the cook, who used to slip Maya an extra roll, stopped making eye contact. The whispers became impossible to ignore. She's not a tutor. She's just the help. She's crossing lines. What happens when she fails him? Each comment cut deeper than the last, but Maya pressed on. Every evening she erased the whiteboard in the breakfast nook, her fingers lingering on Ethan's scribbled notes. I like numbers now. Fractions are friends. She told herself those words were worth more than gossip. One afternoon, as Ethan built a tower of number pairs, Maya felt the weight of someone watching. She turned. Lucas stood in the doorway, arms folded, face unreadable. 4 plus 2 is 6. That's even, Ethan said proudly. Correct, Maya encouraged, smiling. Lucas's eyes flicked to the whiteboard, to the magnets arranged neatly in rows. He gave no comment, just turned and walked away. That night, as Maya scrubbed counters, Mrs. Adela passed by carrying linens. She whispered without meeting Maya's eyes. Careful. You've made an impression that either gets you fired or adopted as family. The next day, as sunlight poured into the breakfast nook, Ethan suddenly asked, Why don't you have your own classroom? Maya blinked. You're better than my school teacher, he insisted. You don't get mad when I mess up. You make numbers make sense. Her throat tightened. She crouched beside him. Sometimes people don't get the jobs they're best at. Not everyone gets the same chances. That's dumb, Ethan muttered. She chuckled. It is. But his question lingered long after he went upstairs for reading hour. That evening, Lucas summoned Maya into his study. She wiped her hands on her apron, heart pounding. I've reviewed Ethan's progress reports, he said flatly. His teacher called again. She says he's different now, focused, confident. They asked if I hired a professional tutor. Maya tensed. I told them no, Lucas continued. But let's be clear. You're doing something I didn't expect, and I appreciate the results. Still, this is not a teaching position. You'll continue, but keep it quiet. The words hit harder than a shout. Keep going, but stay invisible. Maya walked outside after, staring at the California night sky. She whispered to herself, maybe I'm not a miracle worker, but maybe I'm the right person at the right time. By Monday, Ethan burst into the kitchen, waving another test. 98. Maya hugged him tightly. You've always been smart. Now you see it too. Lucas appeared moments later, glanced at the paper, and, uncharacteristically, smiled. That deserves a reward. San Diego this weekend. Father and son Ethan's eyes shone, but Maya felt a pang of distance. This was Ethan's triumph, yet she knew her part would remain hidden. A package arrived later that week, a sleek tablet engraved with Ethan's name, preloaded with math apps. Inside, a card in Lucas's hand read, For your hard work and focus. Keep it up. Dad. Ethan turned the device over and over. It's cool, he whispered. But that night, he tucked it back into the box and chose Maya's flashcards instead. When Lucas noticed days later, he entered the nook quietly as Ethan solved a puzzle. You've done more than I expected, he told Maya afterward. You've got away with him. Maya met his eyes. He just needed light to find his own path. Lucas nodded, then offered something surprising. Perhaps a tutoring role, formal with compensation. Maya straightened her shoulders. With respect, Mr. Carter, I didn't help your son for money. I helped him because he deserved to be seen. Lucas's face hardened. Let's not make this personal. But Maya's voice remained steady. It is personal. To him. To me. You're asking me to split myself in half. Maid and tutor. But sometimes miracles come disguised in aprons. She walked away, leaving him stunned. For a while, things settled into an uneasy rhythm. Lessons continued. Ethan's confidence grew. Maya studied by night, dreaming of one day becoming a teacher for real. Then came the knock, a sharp rap at the mansion's door one Saturday morning. Maya opened it to find a woman in a navy suit, briefcase in hand, sunglasses hiding her eyes. My name is Julia Marks. I'm an educational consultant. Mr. Carter hired me to evaluate his son. Maya froze. Inside the breakfast nook, Julia observed Ethan with sharp precision. After a series of rapid-fire questions, she announced, He's 2 grade levels ahead. Remarkable progress. Whoever is teaching him Maid, tutor, or miracle, deserves recognition. When Lucas walked in, Julia's verdict echoed, "Consider making it official." Maya's heart pounded, but the greatest storm came days later. Camille Whitmore, Ethan's estranged mother, arrived in a sleek black car, heels clicking against the stone driveway. She swept into the kitchen without warning, ivory suit pristine, red lipstick sharp as a blade. "Ethan!" she exclaimed, arms wide. The boy looked up, uncertain. "Hi, Mom. I've heard of your scores." Camille's smile didn't reach her eyes. "I'm proud. But you don't need to spend time doing this with—" Her gaze flicked to Maya. "With the help." Ethan frowned. "But she makes math make sense." Camille's voice hardened. "You'll have tutors at my place. Real tutors. It's time you came home with me." Ethan stepped back, shaking his head. "I don't want to leave. I want to stay where I'm smart." The words silenced the room. "I want to stay where I'm smart." For the first time, Ethan's voice carried authority, not fear. Maya's eyes stung. Lucas froze. Camille's painted smile cracked. That evening, Lucas and Camille argued behind closed doors, their voices sharp. Maya overheard fragments. Custody revision. Appearances. Irresponsible. The next morning, Lucas informed Maya, "She's pushing for joint custody. She claims Ethan's education has been mismanaged. She has lawyers." Maya's heart sank. "Don't worry," Lucas added briskly. "We'll handle it." But his clenched jaw betrayed the truth. Ethan sensed the tension. His questions slowed, his laughter dimmed. One night, he whispered to Maya, "Are you leaving?" "No," she promised, voice breaking. "I'm still here." Days later, a placement test from Westbridge Academy arrived, delivered by courier. Lucas handed it to Maya with clipped instructions. "Administer it privately. If he passes, he qualifies for admission." Maya sat with Ethan in the laundry room, their secret classroom reborn. He struggled, froze, whispered, "I can't." "Yes, you can," she reminded him softly. "You've solved harder than this." "Just breathe." 2 hours later, he finished, exhausted but glowing. The results came days later. Ethan placed 2 grades ahead, offered a scholarship, but the victory was bittersweet. Lucas warned, Camille will use this to strengthen her custody case. The mansion felt less like a home, more like a battlefield. Papers arrived daily, legal documents, petitions, schedules. Ethan clung to Maya's hand, asking again and again, "Will you still help me if I leave?" "Always," she whispered. But she knew the truth. The decision might soon lie in the hands of a judge. And in that cold courtroom, it wouldn't matter that she had taught him with candy, with songs, with patience. She would be seen as only what the world called her, the maid. Still, Maya straightened her shoulders. She had crossed every invisible line already. If a courtroom demanded her voice, she would speak, because Ethan had built his courage on hers, and no law in the world could erase that. The Carter estate had never felt so fragile. Once its marble halls echoed only with the sound of order, staff moving in rhythm, Lucas Carter barking instructions, business calls buzzing from his office. Now the silence was different. It wasn't calm. It was the pause before a storm. Every day more envelopes arrived, some stamped with the seal of California courts, others thick with legal jargon that Maya barely understood. Words like custody revision and educational mismanagement jumped out at her whenever Lucas tossed papers onto his desk. Camille Whitmore was no longer a ghost from Ethan's past. She was everywhere, her name on documents, her voice in arguments that stretched late into the night, her presence turning the boys' once bright mornings into anxious shadows. Ethan clung tighter to Maya than ever. "Will she take me away?" he asked one night, his head tucked under her arm in the laundry room, where they still held secret lessons. Maya's chest tightened. "I don't know," she admitted softly, "but wherever you go, we'll keep learning." "That promise stands." He looked up at her, eyes shimmering. "Then promise me one more thing." "What's that, baby?" "Promise you won't disappear." Her throat ached, but she nodded. "I promise." The following week, a counselor arrived. Dr. Ruth Landry, a woman with silver hair and kind eyes, clipboard in hand. She observed Ethan through meals during reading hour, and finally while Maya guided him through a geometry puzzle in the laundry room. This is our secret math hideout, Ethan whispered proudly as he pieced together a triangle. When he completed it, he smiled, not with triumph, but with certainty. I knew I could. Dr. Landry paused mid-note, watching the glow in the boy's face. Before leaving, she leaned toward Maya and whispered, "He's lucky to have you." Whatever your title is, it was the first kindness Maya had heard from anyone outside Ethan in weeks. But any comfort vanished the day Camille herself stormed into the house. She arrived in ivory and pearls, lipstick red as fire, heels clicking like a countdown against marble floors. "I want to see him." "Now," she demanded, brushing past Lucas. Maya was in the kitchen, arranging spoons into multiplication groups with Ethan, when Camille appeared. "Ethan," she sang, arms wide. He looked up, startled but cautious. "Hi, Mom. I've missed you." Her voice softened, but only on the surface. "I hear you're doing better." "Proud of you, baby, but you don't need to do all this with—" She cut a sharp glance at Maya. "Well?" "Never mind," Ethan frowned. "With what?" Camille's smile faltered. "Nothing. It's just, you'll have real tutors with me, a proper environment. It's time you came home for the first time in his short life." Ethan's voice rose, not trembling, not timid, but firm. "I don't want to leave," he said. "I want to stay where I'm smart. I want to stay where I'm smart." The words stunned the room. Lucas froze, torn between pride and fear. Maya's heart swelled. Camille's painted confidence cracked, just for a second. That sentence wasn't just defiance. It was a declaration of identity. 2 days later, Lucas told Maya, "We're going to court." She's pushing hard. She has lawyers, statements from staff, even psychologists on her payroll. She'll argue that letting a maid teach our son was reckless. Maya felt the sting of that word, maid, like a slap. Lucas studied her. "Would you speak if asked? About Ethan? About what you've done?" Maya didn't hesitate. "Yes, if it helps him, I'll speak." Lucas gave a curt nod, but in his eyes flickered something rare. Trust. The courthouse was colder than Maya expected. Not in temperature, but in soul. Wood-paneled walls, sharp suits, and faces that looked at Ethan like he was a case file instead of a child. Lucas sat stiff in his charcoal suit. Ethan swung his legs nervously, clutching Maya's hand. Across the aisle, Camille looked immaculate, her lawyer whispering strategy. When the judge entered, steel-gray hair, eyes sharp as a hawk, the room fell silent. "We are here to hear the custody modification request concerning Ethan Whitmore Carter." "Let's proceed." Camille's lawyer rose first. "Your Honor, Miss Whitmore seeks joint custody based on clear evidence of educational neglect. Reports show Ethan was failing under Mr. Carter's care until recently, when his progress came not from licensed instruction, but from a household employee, Miss Maya Williams, who lacks formal qualifications. This arrangement was unauthorized, irregular, and irresponsible." Maya felt the weight of every gaze shift toward her. The lawyer added, "This is not about ill intent, but the law requires proper care, proper credentials, and proper oversight. Ethan deserves more than experiments," Lucas's attorney countered. "Your Honor, while Miss Williams may not hold a teaching license, the results are undeniable. Ethan's academic transformation is documented. Placement exams, consultant evaluations, and testimonies from school. He is thriving. This court must consider results as much as credentials." The judge leaned back. "I will hear from Miss Williams directly." Maya's breath caught. She hadn't been formally called, but now every eye turned to her. She walked to the witness stand, sat down, and adjusted the microphone with trembling fingers. "Miss Williams," the judge asked, "why did you begin teaching Ethan?" Maya glanced at the boy, then back at the judge. "Because he was hurting. Not on the outside, but in here," she tapped her chest. "He thought he was stupid, that he couldn't learn. But I saw different. I saw a child who needed to be seen, not just graded." "And you believe your involvement changed him?" "Yes, but it wasn't me alone. He did the work. He found his courage. I just held the light long enough for him to walk toward it." Camille's lawyer stood sharply. "But you are not a teacher." Maya met his gaze without flinching. "I may not stand in a classroom with 20 desks, But I taught a boy how to believe in himself again. That's teaching, the judge raised a hand, silencing the room. Final question, Miss Williams. Why did you continue teaching him even when told to stop? Maya swallowed, her voice steady. Because the heart doesn't check credentials before it decides to care. The room fell into a hush. Even Camille's lawyer faltered. Lucas stared at Maya, as though seeing her for the first time. Ethan's eyes filled with tears. That was the moment the courtroom shifted. Not legally, but emotionally. The judge called a recess, her gavel sharp against the desk. As people shuffled, Ethan ran to Maya, throwing his arms around her waist. You were amazing, he whispered. You made me brave. She knelt, hugging him tight. You've always been brave. You just needed to see it. Lucas approached, voice low. Thank you. Whatever happens tomorrow, thank you. Maya nodded silently, her heart too full for words. Outside, the California sun felt foreign after the sterile cold of the courtroom. They walked down the courthouse steps together, Lucas, Maya, and Ethan, each carrying a different weight. For Ethan, it was hope. For Lucas, it was fear disguised as composure. For Maya, it was the heavy knowledge that whatever the judge decided tomorrow, she had already given Ethan something no ruling could take away. Belief. That night, in her tiny quarters above the garage, Maya pulled out an old notebook. She scribbled one sentence across the page. Children aren't waiting to pass a test. They're waiting to be found. She closed her eyes, whispering to the dark, let them see him. Let them see us, because tomorrow the final verdict would come. And whatever the outcome, the world would never again dismiss Ethan Carter or the maid who believed in him. The second day in court arrived beneath a pale California sky. The waiting room hummed with tension. Lucas sat rigid, Ethan's small legs swung nervously, and Maya rested a steady hand on his back. Will the judge say I have to go with her? Ethan whispered, not daring to lift his eyes. Maya leaned down. Whatever happens, your voice was heard. That matters. At 9 sharp, the bailiff opened the doors. Court is now in session. The judge entered, robe flowing, expression unreadable. Papers shuffled, lawyers straightened ties, but Maya's eyes never left Ethan's face. I have listened to testimony regarding the custody modification of Ethan Whitmore Carter, the judge began. Both parties have shown love and concern. But my responsibility is not to reward unconventional success. It is to ensure stability in the child's well-being. Camille sat taller, confidence flickering in her eyes. The judge continued, therefore, I am denying the request for joint custody at this time. Gasps rippled across the courtroom. Lucas exhaled slowly. Camille's face tightened. But, the judge added, expanded visitation rights will be granted, along with an independent child advocate to monitor Ethan's progress. Furthermore, I recommend that Ethan's education remains supervised, and I strongly advise formal training for whoever is guiding him. Her gaze shifted to Maya. The law may not grant you a title, Miss Williams, but this court acknowledges your contribution. Consider pursuing certification. You clearly have a gift. Maya's throat ached. She managed only 2 words. Thank you. Outside, Ethan grabbed her hand, eyes wide. So, I can stay? Maya nodded, smiling through tears. Yes, sweetheart. You can stay. Lucas surprised them both with a quiet, almost sheepish suggestion. Lunch. On me at a diner near the courthouse. Ethan scribbled math puzzles on napkins while Maya sipped tea. Lucas watched in silence, his face softer than Maya had ever seen. He finally spoke. You didn't have to testify yesterday. You could have stayed safe, but you chose him over yourself. Maya met his eyes. He's worth more than safe. Lucas nodded, and for once, the millionaire looked less like a titan of industry and more like a man learning humility. That evening, as Maya prepared lesson plans in her small room, she found an envelope at her door. Inside was a crisp notebook and a note in Lucas's handwriting. Not every teacher begins in a classroom. Some begin in kitchens or laundry rooms. Promise me you'll keep going. Maya pressed the note to her chest. For the first time, she believed she might. Her whispered reply carried into the night. I'm not just helping him anymore. I'm becoming who I was meant to be. The next morning, Lucas entered the breakfast nook carrying a new package. He placed it on the table. Application papers, he said simply, for a teacher credential program. If you choose. Maya stared at him, stunned. You want me to leave? No, Lucas replied, voice steady. I want you to grow. Ethan isn't the only one with a future. Ethan looked between them, his grin wide. Does that mean you'll be a real teacher, Miss Maya? She knelt, taking his hand. I'll always be your teacher. But maybe soon, I'll be one for others too. His face lit up brighter than any grade on a test. Days later, Ethan came bounding in with another folded note in his messy handwriting. Maya opened it and smiled at the crayon words. Thank you for being my forever teacher. The house felt lighter. Ethan laughed more. Lucas nodded from doorways instead of scowling. And Maya, once invisible, now stood at the center of a story no one could have predicted. She had started as the maid who picked up broken pieces. Now she was something more, the bridge that carried a child from failure to triumph, and herself toward a new destiny. And yet in her heart, Maya knew this was only the beginning. Spring sunlight spilled softly across the Carter estate. In the breakfast nook, the once blank whiteboard now overflowed with equations, doodles, and Ethan's triumphant scrawls. I like numbers now. Maya stood quietly, fingertips brushing the markers lined neatly in their tray. Just months ago, she had been told to stay invisible, to remain the help. Now a court had recognized her, Ethan believed in her, and Lucas, once her harshest critic, had given her the means to grow beyond the limits of her apron. That morning, Ethan bounded into the room clutching a geometry kit. Miss Maya, can we build another bridge? One for fractions. She laughed, kneeling beside him. Of course, baby. We'll build as many bridges as you need. As they worked, Lucas entered, pausing in the doorway. For the first time, there was no disapproval in his gaze, only quiet pride. You've changed him, he said softly. Maya looked up. He just needed someone to believe he wasn't broken. Later in her small quarters, Maya opened her laptop and clicked to submit on her teacher credential application. Her hands trembled, not from fear, but from the weight of a dream she had once buried. She whispered to herself, Children aren't waiting to pass a test. They're waiting to be found. In that moment, she understood. She hadn't just saved Ethan. She had rediscovered herself. The maid who once hid in the shadows was now stepping into her calling. Not because a judge approved, or because a millionaire funded her path, but because she had dared to believe that love and patience could rewrite a future. That evening, Ethan slipped a folded note into her hand. In messy crayon letters, it read, Thank you for being my forever teacher. Her throat tightened. She hugged him close and whispered, Always, because sometimes the most powerful teachers don't stand at chalkboards. They build bridges, one child, one act of faith, one quiet moment at a time. If this story inspired you, consider subscribing for more. And if not, a simple like still helps us keep sharing these journeys.